let's start by asking a basic question. What is it that makes me me? That is to say, not just what makes me human, but what is it that makes me this particular human? Me, okay? What makes me the same person that I was yesterday, or last year, or 10 years ago? What makes me me? Here are some of those embarrassing pictures I was mentioning, okay? Here are photographs of me. Right there I am as a little baby with a Davy Crockett hat on. There's my junior high school photograph. That picture on the right, that is my college graduation picture. It was 1975. What can I tell you? There I am on my way here to Austin for the first time. That's my wife and I at South Fork Ranch. That TV show Dallas was a big thing at the time. There I am at, well, had been at a Carolina Panthers game. I won't tell you how much beer my brother gave me in order to induce me to let someone paint my face that way. And there I am in the classroom at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, all of those are me, okay? I am in some sense the same person. Now I sort of remember that, vaguely remember that, mostly the headache the next day, and so on. But once you get back to that, I don't remember at all. And so what is it that actually makes me me? What gives me a kind of unity? Well, one answer is that what makes somebody the same person is that they have the same soul. It was the same soul in that baby sitting on the sofa with a Davy Crockett hat that was in the junior high school kid and the college graduate and so on and so forth, and is in me now. So that's one possible answer. We could say A and B are the same person if they have the same soul. But that raises a really interesting and profound question. What is a soul? Now, some of you probably think people have souls, some might not. And so you might think, well, there is no such thing as a soul. Others might think there is. But if there is, what is it? Okay, now here is one way of looking at this question, what a soul is. That it really is a distinct entity, that it is separable from the body. Of course, it's absurd to think of it as some part of the body inside that has wheels and can swim and all of that. But you might think that the soul is something that has some relation to the body, is in some way embodied, and that although it's not really simply a part of the body, it nevertheless has a relation to the body, but it can be separated. So the idea is that life after death, or even reincarnation, is a real possibility. The soul could survive the death of the body. Maybe the soul could even inhabit another body. Well, there is a problem with this view. How does the soul relate to the body? What is the connection? But nevertheless, that's a problem that arises, as we'll see. Really, for lots of people, it's not just a commitment to a soul. If you think that you have a mind, and that you have mental events going on in it, things like thoughts, feelings, perceptions, desires, and so on, you're going to have to say something about how they relate to the body too. And so this would just be one particular version of what philosophers call the mind-body problem. So in any event, that's one possible view. It's a view common to Plato, to Christianity, to Hinduism. Aristotle tries to give us a different view. Aristotle's idea is that the soul is real. In fact, your essence, what makes you you, is your soul. But nevertheless, he wants to tie your soul to the body in a closer sort of way. So, he talks about substance, as we've seen. All of the categories depend on the notion of substance. But when he gets to this question of the soul, he tells us a bit more about what substance really is. He says we are in the habit of recognizing as one determinate kind of what is substance, and that in several senses. So we've already talked about primary substance, individual objects basically, and secondary substances or kinds. Here he gives us a little bit more information. He says we might have in mind the matter of something, of that which is itself a this. We might be talking about its form or its essence, which is that precisely in virtue of which a thing is called a this. And third, in the sense which is a compound, the matter and the form together. So we might think of substances as objects or as kinds, but then if we take the idea of a substance as an object seriously, we might have in mind the matter or the form or the combination. So for example, I might say, look, my hand is part of me. And there I'm acting as if I am to be identified with matter. I might say, my mind is part of me, or my thoughts are, or something like that, or I might refer to the form of my body and identify myself with that. I might also think about the compound and think of myself as consisting of, well, this flesh and blood, but also a certain form, a certain essence that is instantiated here. Now, here's why it matters. Take an individual substance. Oh, an ordinary thing, like a key, for example. That key is something that has matter. It looks bronzy. I don't know if that's what it really is. And it has a certain form. The shape of it is what enables it to open a certain door. Well, that's something that has then matter, the stuff of which it's made, and a particular form. An individual person is the same way. I am made of matter, but also I have a form, and my form is my soul. So, as an ordinary individual substance is matter and form together, so a person is matter and soul together. The soul is something like the form or the essence of the person. So what does that mean? Well, he says the soul must be a substance, and what sort of substance? It's not itself matter. It isn't itself even a compound of matter in something. It's rather this form of the natural body having life potentially within it. It is something like the essence. So the soul is to be understood as my form, the form of my body. Now what does that mean? Does it just mean this shape? Does it mean like, hey, I'm going to the gym and work out my form. I work out my soul. My soul is getting awfully muscular. Or I'm on a diet. My soul is getting smaller. No, it's not like that, right? It's something else. In fact, he says, here's how we should think of the soul of a person. As something like a unified set of capacities. Your soul is something like the set of abilities or capacities you have. The things you could possibly do. That's a way of understanding what your essence is. And in that respect, you might say, your essence is going to be different from the essence of a cat. There are things you can do that a cat cannot do. It's not just that your body has a different shape. Yes, that's true, but that's not what matters. What matters are the abilities, the capacities associated. Now, I've been using those two terms almost interchangeably, but what's the difference between an ability and a capacity? An ability is something that I have, let's say, actually developed. I have the ability to play the piano because I've practiced and so on, and I've been doing it for years. So I have that ability. But even someone who has never seen a piano has the capacity for playing the piano. They could be taught. So, for example, I've never played an oboe. I don't know exactly even how you play one. But I assume I have the capacity to play the oboe. If somebody taught me and so on, I think I could learn to do it. Or an example that Aristotle is fond of, speaking Greek. Suppose you don't know any Greek. You have the capacity to speak Greek. That is to say, you could learn to speak Greek. You could be taught. You could have grown up in Greece. You could go to Greece now. You could study Greek in school. You have the capacity to learn Greek, even if you do not now have the ability. So a capacity is something like an ability to have an ability. And we're to think in terms of those capacities as really characterizing what is essential to you. So here is the way he puts it when he's giving us an official definition. It is, as often the case in Aristotle, when he gives an official definition, a little hard to understand. He says, the soul is the first grade of actuality of a natural body having life potentially in it. And it's that sort of, well, the first grade of actuality I have in mind here. What does he mean by that? He means something like that set of capacities. It's substance in the sense which corresponds to the definitive formula of a thing. What is it that really makes you you? It's the set of capacities you have. Now, some of those you've actually developed into abilities. Some of them you might actually be using at a given time. So you might say, apothein in thelo. And then you're speaking Greek as you're actually doing it, right? You're putting that into practice. That's the actuality of speaking Greek. Having learned Greek, that gives you the ability to speak Greek, let's say, even though you're not doing it right then. And then, of course, you have the capacity, even if you've never learned any Greek at all. So, the soul, he's saying, is your essence. That's what's really essential to you. That's what makes you you. Now, you might think, wait a minute, don't all people then have the same soul? Don't we all have the same set of capacities? Do we differ in capacities? Are there things you could learn to do that I could just never learn to do? Probably yes, right? Actually, here's an example. I used to play tennis, and I actually took tennis in college. I played for some years with a colleague of mine here. I always lost. I mean, I basically stink playing tennis, okay? And I tried hard to get better, and I just never got better. Part of it is my vision. I don't have very good depth perception. So when a ball is speeding at me, I'm not very good at hitting it or catching it or, doing anything with it, basically. I didn't used to play baseball, but then I pitched, and I just hoped it never came back to me. Which it did, and ended my pitching career because I got hit in the eye with a line drive. And see, I wasn't very good at catching it. Instead of going like this, I just went, well, anyway, yes, that's a long time ago. But now here's the point. Could I really become a good tennis player? No. I actually had a student who was a terrific tennis player. She played the Australian Open, French Open, US Open, Wimbledon. She offered to give me lessons for free. And I said no, because I said, I'm hopeless. That was in a way a great opportunity missed. But if you think, look, you never really have the capacity anyway, it would have been just more and more frustration. There was no point. I did give up tennis many years ago, when finally I said to my friend who was beating me all the time, I just never improved. This is so frustrating. Why do I always lose? And he could have said, because I'm better than you. But instead he said, oh, you got to be out on the court every day. If you're not going to do that, give up the game. So I gave up the game. So anyway, do I have the capacity to play tennis? Well, in some sense, I have the capacity to play tennis poorly. Do I have the capacity to play it well? In my opinion, no. I would never be very good. He was 20 years older than I am, and I could still never beat him. And so, it got to the point where it's embarrassing. It's like, all right, he's 60, I'm 40, and he still skunks me completely. At that point, I just said, forget it. Yes?
Might you have the capacity because had you started playing tennis when you were like 4 years old, you may be able to compensate for your vision?
Could I?
I'm a very good tennis player.
Yeah, what if I had started when I was 4? Could I have had that capacity? I don't know. I doubt it, actually, because I think I'm just not physically coordinated enough. But actually, there's another Simpson clip I will show you at one point, where poor Lisa, goes in and she says, I want to be a professional saxophone player. And the guy says, well, here are your chops. So she goes, and he says, oh, nice. She said, so, do I have talent? He said, yeah, sure. Could I be a professional? No. She said, but I'll practice every day. And he said, well, look, you've got a condition I call stubby fingers. And, it's the same with me. I can play the piano. I can play decently. Could I play super, super well? No. I do not have the capacity, in my opinion, to be a great pianist. And even if I had started earlier and so on, I probably wouldn't because my fingers are kind of stubby. I'm like Lisa Simpson. I can't stretch that far and so on. And so there are differences in capacities. And so we shouldn't think that everybody would end up simply with the same soul as a result of this. Okay. Well, anyway, the soul, he says, is not only the form of the body, it is its cause. And in what sense? Well, it's the source or origin of movement. When I make a movement, playing tennis or playing the piano or just gesturing as I lecture, it is my soul that is the ultimate cause of that movement. I'm doing that intentionally, I'm moving, and the soul is at the start of that process. It is also the end. That is to say, it is my ultimate purpose or goal. The soul is what is the final cause of my body. It's something that my body is really ultimately all about. I do various things for the good of the soul, ultimately. And it is to be identified as the essence of the entire living body. Well, that makes the soul inseparable from the body, he says. It is not only the cause of motion, it is not only the final purpose or goal or end of the body, it is not only the essence of the body. Those are the 3 key ideas from that last slide. But he says it follows that the soul cannot be separated from the body. So in this way, Aristotle's conception of the soul, though it's similar in some ways to that of Plato, to that of Christianity or of Hinduism, is different. The soul cannot be separated from the body, he says. At any rate, certain parts of it are, if it has parts, but the actuality of some of them is nothing but the actualities of their bodily parts. Now, what does that mean about the possibility of life after death? Could my soul survive my own death?
I hope not.
You say,
Not if you're attached to your body.
if it's inseparable from the body, it's hard to see how it could. Now, maybe you can think of a way. Yeah.
A dead body is still a body.
A still body, yes, a dead body is still a body. On the other hand, life is not potentially within it. And so that's why he frames that definition in the way he does. He doesn't want the form of your dead body to be a soul. When the body dies, the soul is in effect departed because there is no longer life potentially in it. Yes?
Well, energy stores form, right? So once you're dead, you can say you can go back and become comfortable story.
Oh, all right. Yeah, she has in mind this sort of, maybe after, since your body decomposes after you die, maybe you become compost. You know, maybe flowers grow out of you. So maybe your soul becomes the soul of the flower. All right, there is a new agey way of taking it like that. Can you think of any other way in which it could be possible on Aristotelian grounds for you to have life after death? If this is what a soul is. Yeah?
It seems like he's talking about the body being dependent on the soul, but not necessarily the soul being dependent on the body. So if the body is gone and it's not necessarily wired to it, then it seems like the other outcomes would be either the soul creating another body or the soul going to a different sort of route in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, good. One thing you could say is that he's wrong to conclude that it's inseparable from the body, any more than the essence of gold, let's say, being atomic number 79, is inseparable from actual bits of gold. Yes, you can't take the atomic number 79 out of the gold, but on the other hand, you might say that essence of having atomic number 79 is something you could have even if there were no gold. Actually, look at the elements down there at the bottom. Okay, that chart goes up to 103, and a lot of those elements at the bottom that are there in ghostly white have to be produced in the lab. They are not found in nature. There could be other things. Actually, I think now we've generated momentarily in laboratories elements that go beyond something with atomic number 103. They don't last very long. They have to be produced under very special conditions. But my point is, you might think that the element of, let's say, being element with atomic number 103 or 107 or what have you, can exist independently of particular versions that exist. So one thing you could say is, wait, maybe the essence can exist without the body. Another thing you could say is, what if it's in another body? It could be a question of reincarnation, or what if it's actually a matter of the resurrection of the body? That is to say, it's not just that your soul is brought back without its body, maybe the soul is brought back along with the body. And so we shouldn't immediately conclude there could be such a thing as life after death. But it won't be as simple as saying the soul, and here's the image in Hinduism, the soul steps out of the chariot and just waits for a new chariot. We can't say something as easy as that, but there might be some things we could say. Yeah?
Not to mention the fact that, now I forgot what I was going to say. Go ahead.
Sorry, okay.
I mean, kind of right now from what we're doing is we're resurrecting Aristotle's soul by talking about what he's talked about and what he's thought about. So in a way, like, I recently had my brother-in-law pass away, and I feel like because we're always talking about him and we're affected by his actions from like the good stuff that he's done, we've kind of let his legacy live on through us, and we've tried to change ourselves kind of to shape after the good stuff that he's done in life. So isn't that a form of letting life live on after?
All right, that's a really interesting question. You might think if the idea is that the soul is a cause of motion, it is ordinarily, and this is what Aristotle primarily thinks, it's the cause of motion within your body. However, you might say a life, even once it is literally over, continues to exert a causal force. People act a certain way, people think a certain way, because of those who have gone before them and influenced them, and who are now dead. And so in that way, you might think that soul is still active, is still causing motion, even if it's not the motion of the same body. It might be that you respond in a certain way by having known that person. My mother died many, many years ago when I was relatively young, and I could feel the same way about her. She literally is gone, but you might say her soul is still the cause of certain actions, still the cause of certain motions. And so in that way, you might argue that actually not only is it theoretically possible for someone's essence to live on after the death of the body, but maybe it does in that form. It does in the sense that it still actually is a cause of motion, a cause of thinking, and so on. And in that respect, continues to have a kind of existence. So yeah, I think that's actually an interesting thing I think you could say, given an Aristotelian starting point. Yeah?
So I have a question. If the soul is inseparable, Aristotle says the soul is inseparable from the body, do you think he's interpreting the soul as like memory and experience instead of something more metaphysical?
What does he really mean? I mean, we've got this first actuality of a body with life potentially within it, etc. Come on, are you talking about perceptions, memories, personality traits, things like that? Well, no, not really. You're thinking about capacities, and maybe your personality traits and other things affect those capacities. But we're going to see an alternative view that actually does talk about the contents of the mind as being essential in a way that they are not for Aristotle. So I don't think he has that kind of thing in mind. But there was a question back here.
Oh, okay. I was saying like a paranormal kind of thing, like how like on like I think it's Poltergeist, they talk about like they built a house on top of an Indian reserve where a bunch of people died, and that's why it was haunted. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Well, yes. Haunted houses. Could that be first potentialities of bodies with life potentially within them still lurking about? I don't know. I find it very hard to make sense of that from Aristotle's point of view, unless you think that actually there is such a thing as a ghostly body, and the soul, as it were, moves from a physical body to a ghostly body or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, he says that the soul is the soul is a cause of body, that it's the essence of the living body, and so I think the key point is he thinks it's inseparable as long as it's living. I don't think he makes a distinction for once you're gone, it's free game for the soul.
Oh, that's an interesting point, that all this has to do with a living body, or at least a body with life potentially within it. And so once someone is dead, you might say, he really doesn't have any commitment about the possibility of what the soul is, or how it might relate to a body, or how it might cause motion, or anything after that. And you might be right. It may be that, look, this theory is just meant to be silent on these questions. Yeah?
So what about those people who put their heads in freezers when they die? Is it at least a vague possibility? I'm no scientist, but we don't know what future technologies will be. Isn't there a possibility of them coming back in some form? I don't know, but...
Well, okay, maybe. I mean, maybe if you have yourself frozen at the right moment, then somebody later will be able to actually come back and cure what ailed you and, give you a renewed life. But I think people there were thinking of that as something like a suspended animation, not sort of a literal death and rebirth. Though maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I don't think Aristotle was aware of such places. I will say there's an important image that Aristotle uses at one point that has echoes in later philosophy. Descartes speaks of the soul in the same way. We have no light on the problem whether the soul may not be the actuality of its body, in the sense in which the sailor is the actuality of the ship. The idea that a soul is in a body in something like the way that a sailor is in a ship is, I think, a very interesting idea. The sailor, and sometimes it's translated as pilot. In the Latin, Descartes just uses the term sailor, but in the French version it sounds more like pilot. And Aristotle's word could mean either one. You could have in mind someone who's steering the ship, or someone who's just along for the ride. But in any case, it looks like the thing most relevant to Aristotle is the person steering, the person who is the cause of motion. And so that analogy of your soul being in your body like a sailor in a ship is something we're going to come back to a number of times.